There we go. Yep. So thank you again for joining us tonight. My name is Amanda Miller. I am the Executive Director of the South King Tool Library here in Federal Way. You can see that big old blue building there. That's one of my other babies. We are very excited to have this class tonight. I'll introduce our teacher here in a minute. I just had a couple things that I was really excited to share with you guys. And first and foremost, I need to make sure I know how to do this. There we go. We have tools. Go figure. It's a tool library. So just like the regular library, we are barrierless. We do not require a membership fee. We ask that if you would like to donate, you're welcome to donate maybe the value that you find in it, but we work hard to make this community resource available to the community. And we have some really great things that we just kind of bolstered up our spring inventory. Plenty of lawnmowers, we have hedge trimmers, weed whackers or string trimmers, edgers, and a couple new dethatchers, and a very exciting new brush cutter, and then a lot of other things for your yard and home you might not, or you might see there in that picture and you might not expect us to have. We also have a lot of manual tools. I know everybody's trying to lose those COVID pounds, so skip the electric and get your workout going with some of these manual tools. Some really great aerator shoes. If you need that like glute calf workout, you can work on your whole yard with those. I usually recommend a teenager to go with them because that's a lot of energy too. But we have really nice step pullers that can pull up the whole root of a weed, loppers, pruners, manual lawnmowers. You're looking for an extra challenge. And we are here. Our hours there on the right hand side, Monday 11 to 1, Wednesday 4 to 6, and Saturday 11 to 1, plus a little bit more around those times. We just try to keep inventory and maintenance and other things happening, but we're always looking for volunteers to come by. I'm really excited because I got to do math this week and calculate the carbon emissions that we are saving by borrowing instead of buying. So we did partner with our guys, our awesome friends over in Edinburgh, Scotland. The tool library there has some really great resources. They do so many cool things. If you have a chance, just Google them or look them up on Facebook. They're doing tons of cool stuff. But I went through and used some of their calculations to figure out how much carbon we are saving. And one checkout of these, 6 tools here, would give you about 360 pounds of embodied carbon that you're saving. And the equivalent to that, our friends at the EPA helped us plug in and figure out that that's about 15 gallons of gas. So that's filling up my car, which is, I don't know, $50 or so nowadays. So that's kind of a lot. And then 150 pounds of coal, 5 garbage bags of waste, 5 incandescent light bulbs, and 2 trees that are 10 years old. I was just really, really excited to share that with you guys because it's hard to know how much impact we're making when we do certain things, and now we can really put some numbers to it. So we're going to have a work party this Saturday. If you wanted to come out and check out our edible rain garden, it's not quite that pretty right now, so I need your help to get it back to that point where we actually have delineations between the mulch and the grass, and some little guys that have tried to make an escape, but lots to talk about there. It'll be, hopefully rain or shine, we'll be out there digging in the dirt. And yeah, I'll be able to talk to you a little bit more about all of these cool things that I've learned from the Tilth Alliance and some other really great educators in the region. And you might even be able to take some plants home because we have way too many in the garden. So come on by about 10 o'clock. We're going to get started. So hope to see you then. And of course, thank you to the Department of Ecology of Washington State and the EPA Region 10 for allowing us to provide barrierless access to the tool lending and for this class. So that's the end of my commercial. And I'll let Gavin Tiemeyer, he is our teacher for the day. He's an amazing guy with Tilth Alliance, Garden Hotline. Is it kind of both, basically? Both?
Yeah. So the Garden Hotline is funded by King County Hazardous Waste and Seattle Public Utilities, and it's managed by the Tilth Alliance, which is based out of Seattle. in Wallingford. So yeah, my name's Gavin. I am a garden hotline educator at Tilth Alliance. So yeah, we're gonna do you want me to jump into it, Amanda?
Yeah, go for it. Well,
Cool. Well, thanks for the cool carbon data. That's always a fun way to see how you're reducing your carbon footprint. So yeah, I guess the reason why we're here is we're going to talk about lawns, which is very fun. From our perspective at the Garden Hotline, we want to teach people. We want to reduce the use of pesticides and herbicides and unnecessary fertilizer and I guess extra resources like water through garden education. So part of that is learning how to, some things that you may have not thought about when it comes to lawn care. So in this presentation, it's kind of long, so we're gonna not necessarily, we're going to play it by ear, just adjust and adapt if we need to as far as time. But because we are going to cover a lot. So we're going to cover tools, we're going to cover just some bigger picture stuff that has to do with soil health, how soil health and the use of, fertilizers contributes to just the watershed in I guess, an adverse way. Some basic lawn maintenance stuff, which is kind of fun. So that involves aerating, overseeding, and top dressing, and pest management. So yeah, it's going to be a crash course. We're going to try to stay on time as far as I guess time management is concerned, and then we definitely want to have some space afterwards for questions. So if we
I have to
breeze
say
through
that,
the
yeah, if anybody has any questions, feel free to put those into the chat anytime. And I think we'll try to hold them until the end. Usually what we find is they're answered in the next couple slides. So Gavin has so much to go over, but definitely keep those questions in your pocket or share them in the chat.
Yeah. Can you see? I just want to check real quick that you can see my screen, Amanda.
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, cool. So the important thing that I think sometimes, since we think of grass just as the green stuff that sits on the surface, is just the value of having healthy soil. And so this is really where that core philosophy is if we're taking care of the soil, then in theory, healthy soil means that we're going to be, using less pesticides, less fertilizers, reducing irrigation needs. Healthy soil is going to filter out pollutants. It sequesters stormwater, which is great. So it's going to reduce the amount of stormwater that's rushing into our watersheds, and it stores carbon from the atmosphere. This is a slide that a previous employee at Tilth actually put together that just gives you kind of a bird's eye view, I guess, of what is in the soil. So soil is made up of mineral particles, which includes sand, silt, clay. It's made up of air and water and organic matter and soil life. So there's a lot going on in the soil. It's not just dirt. I mean, even someone who works with Tilth, it's hard to conceptualize this, but soil is a living organism. Skip through that. Yeah, so we just have I'm just going to change my view real quick. We have some basic pictures of what happens kind of in modern society with industrialization and just, I guess, urbanization is what happens is a lot of times when houses are developed or when there's developed areas, the top layer of soil is actually removed, or it's compacted, and subsoil, which is more poor quality, is used as fills. And that just contributes to increased toxins and then lack of biota. So just the living stuff in soil that makes it such a great thing. Let's see, there's one particular picture in the lower left right here. If you look, there's a couple mounds and that's actually what that is that soil that is remaining, but all the rest of it is soil or the top soil that has been removed to just kind of, not necessarily the bedrock, but just the layer right below it. So there's no living material to, grow anything on. So this is an interesting fact, one that I haven't really thought of. So a lot of the majority of the soil that we get in bags is manufactured soil, which makes sense. So it's just at a site is, put together of its various organic components. And this is going to be different from native soil. So native soil is stuff that, has built up for thousands of years around here. And so we talked about this in the presentation actually that we did last time with Amanda in the South King Tool Library about the, just the philosophy and just habit of getting soil tested. I don't know if anybody has any experience doing soil testing, but whether you're doing your lawn or any sort of vegetables or plants, it's always good to get your soil tested because, we do live in an industrialized society, particularly here in the Puget Sound. We have a history of, just manufacturing plants, whether that's the one pictured here is the kind of infamous Sarco plant, which is in Tacoma, that operated for 100 years. And so smelter that just puts out lead and arsenic into the soil. So it's always a good idea to get your soil tested to know what you're working with. I'm going to skip this slide. A couple of times I'm going to skip through things just for time management. This is an important concept just to put this out here as far as lawn maintenance is just to, think about the lawn's relationship to the weather that we have here. So Federal Way, and feel free if anybody has, different statistics to call me out on this since I'm from Seattle, but Federal Way is just kind of a smaller, maybe snapshot of what, the Puget Sound is in general. So we get a lot of rain, between January and unfortunately probably up until July, depending on the year. So this lower left, graph right here just kind of shows that classic dip and decreased rainfall, which happens between July and August. And then we have a really hot, dry, arid summer in July through September. So the lowest rainfall is going to be in July. Yeah, so April and September through October, just optimal time for growing grasses. And there are reasons for that. It's raining, it's cooler, so it's going to require less water. Just the lawns in relationship to stormwater, that may not be something we always think about. Even for me, it's not something that is easily can conceptualize, but anything that we put into our lawns, similar to what we were to I guess dump down the storm drain, whether that's insecticides, fungicides, it's going to end up in the watershed, so into the Puget Sound. I think one thing that I think of often is non-organic quick release fertilizers. You put them in the soil and they leach out really quickly because of all the rain we have. So one thing that we always suggest for gardeners and homeowners, whether it's lawn or whatever you're using, is to try to get just organic slow release fertilizers. Yeah, there are some consequences for just garden chemicals. They reduce soil diversity. I'm sorry, they reduce soil diversity, increase the acidity in the soil. And again, all this stuff just runs into the Puget Sound. So a lot of the practices that we're covering right now are hopefully going to reduce what ends up in our waterways. I'm going to skip this slide. I'm going to skip that slide. Lawn care basics. So the rest of the presentation, we're going to cover a little bit of light, drainage, watering, mowing, nutrition, pest, weeds, and disease management. This is a big one around here. So in the garden hotline, we get a lot of questions about, why isn't my lawn growing, or why is it so why does it look so anemic? I don't, if y'all in this presentation or in this workshop could think about your lawn, whether it's, vibrant and lush and green, or if it's kind of maybe a little bit more modest. A lot of that has to do with just basic light. So grass is good, it wants a lot of light. So that's, 6 to 8 hours a day. So you'll notice, I don't know, a lot of us live, within the canopy of these big evergreens, or just, we have these beautiful trees, and in areas where there's going to be a lot of shade, there's going to be some moss, and there's going to be thinner grass, and there's going to, just existing in the shadier areas. So it's always good, I think, when you're thinking about lawn maintenance, just to think of what I would consider cultural conditions. So that's going to be, mainly light and then water are big things with the grass. So before, before being like, oh, we need to like add some fertilizer to try to get this grass going, like it's always good to just think about, maybe the grass isn't receiving enough light and maybe something better would suit it there, like a ground cover, possibly reducing your lawn, which is something that we'll talk about here too. This is a big one for lawn health, and this is kind of new to me too, but this concept of drainage. So root depth for grasses is going to be at least 8 inch. You're going to want at least 8 inches of good soil, 12 inches optimal, and non-compacted sandy loam soil. So again, what that means is like grass is going to thrive really well in soil that's going to be nice and aerated. It's going to be a mixture of air particles or air pockets, water, and just living organic material. So those slides that I had showed earlier with the compacted soil, it's a real simple concept. There's probably some science to it, but plants, especially like grass roots, aren't going to want to grow in super compacted soil. So if you're having issues growing healthy grass, that's always something to consider, is just, what's the quality of your soil look like? And this is a cool tool that is relatively new to me. If I had some grass to work with, I would want to buy it just because it's so nifty. And that is called it's called a Hotline, I think, a Hotline aerator. Amanda, do you know, if you had a chance to look at this, is this something that the tool library provides?
Yeah, we have a couple of these. Like I call them plug aerators just because
Yeah.
you pull out plugs. There's some other neat ones that I wish we had that are like rolling and they accumulate those for you because these, you see the little wormy looking guys. It's always hard to kind of get those out. But yeah, it's nice because it removes it instead of just displacing it and shoving things kind of together. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So this is not to be confused with the picture in the middle left. It looks basically just like your garden variety, pitchfork. That's actually compacting the soil. So like Amanda had said, these are kind of hollow tubes. And what that does, you can see in the top left here, is that's going to create these, particularly in compacted soil, it's going to create this permeable layer for just water and nutrients and air to flow in. So I don't know, you could think about it like opening up a window into the grass. Like it's just going to create circulation, which is good. And then after a while, it's going to allow for roots to grow deeper, and just it's going to increase the lawn density, giving you that desired lush green look that you're going for. And so I believe that the tubular things that come out, that you can actually just leave those in the soil, and it's just going to create kind of a top layer of dressing that is, nutrients that doesn't need to be removed. So
It's the surface area is what I always think of, because if you think of like if you put smaller ice cubes into a cup of water, it's going to give you more surface area that'll cool off that cup of water faster. So just like that, you have higher surface area if you remove those plugs, if you have that other ability to get nutrients and things down into the dirt. That's the way I usually explain it.
yeah, no, that's a great way to look at it. That is worth integrating into our slides, because I think that's a perfect example. So thatch is always kind of a hot topic. I feel like it's a concept that is usually misused when people email in the garden hotline. The thatch layer is just it's a thin layer of just kind of like a dense layer of just kind of, I guess, not necessarily dead stuff, but just just stuff that isn't growing anymore below the crown, and just the green grass blades. There's usually a lot of other things that you can do before dethatching. It's not necessarily a last resort. You just want to make sure that it's what you need to do. So cool season grasses, which we have a lot here, do not build thatch quickly. So whereas like maybe other parts of the country, this would be an issue, it's not as normal here. So yeah, thatch is just a normal layer of grass stems, roots, and weed material that is at the base of the lawn. It's not necessarily a bad thing. You can hire companies to dethatch, but you just want to make sure that it's something that is the issue, I guess, that is wrong with the grass. So dethatching would just provide, I guess, an opportunity to, if the grass is at a standstill or if it needs, you want kind of thicker, newer, lusher grass, dethatching would be something to think about. But usually there's other ways to get around that. So
I think a lot of times thatchers or dethatchers are pretty popular because moss is actually what people use, like what is inhibiting. So they usually take out tons of moss with that. And that's what I always think of is people are like, do you have a thatch rake? And then I imagine hobbit houses, and then I say a dethatching is what you want. You
yeah,
want
yeah.
thatch. So
Yeah, and the other quick plug, I guess no pun intended for the cool tool in the last slide, but so a lot of times for moss, like people will apply like a moss killer on it, and what it does is it actually, there's like a fancy word for it, but it almost like temporarily suspends or like paralyzes the moss, and then the moss just grows back like thicker and happier. So you actually, if you ever want to get rid of moss in your grass, you need to remove it with like a similar to the fork above, just the opposite sides of the prickly tines, and just, or else it's just going to come back. So I think we talk about that in one of these slides here. So overseeding and top dressing, again, just to give a little bit of some framework here. So these are aerating and overseeding and top dressing, or just the basic core components of overall lawn health. So overseeding and top dressing. Let's see. Overseeding is just, again, you're going to want to do it in cool weather, and we're just kind of spreading out seed in copious amounts. In places where there's bare spots, you can put a ton of seed. And around the same time, while you're overseeding, you can add a little bit of slow release organic fertilizer. So, and this is, overseeding is something that takes place after aeration. And if you decide that you need to, I guess, dethatch. I just want to look at my notes real quick and make sure that there's nothing I am missing here.
yeah, it's almost 6:30 just to do a time checks for you. And
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Let's keep breezing through this here. So top dressing is kind of a cool concept, and we were talking with someone earlier about this. Just so top dressing is more or less any sort of layer of nutrients that is going to go on the grass. So a lot of times when we talk about top dressing, we talk about a thin layer of compost, actually. So there are great reasons to, I guess, top dress after overseeding. And the big reason is you're going to be keeping those seeds moist and protected until they germinate. So they should germinate after about 7 to 10 days. The other benefit of top dressing is just it's going to prevent birds from eating the seeds, and it just adds organic matter back into the soil. So watering the lawn. This is a big one. Seems easy enough, but is some, if we're crunched for time, it's like maybe something we don't think about often. But yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty basic. It's just like watering your veggies or watering your ornamental plants. We're gonna want to water your lawn in like either the early morning or I guess even the late evening. And there's pretty simple reasons behind that, simple science. Like you don't want to water your lawn when the sun is blazing, just because of a lot of the water is just going to end up evaporating. So you want to make sure, if you want your lawn to stay green, you want to have 1 inch of water. 1 inch per week to 6-inch depth into soil during the growing season. So you can actually use a tuna can to measure it if you're using a sprinkler system, and that'll let you know how long, I guess, 1 inch of water accumulates. I haven't actually done the tuna can method, so I can't speak from experience. Yeah, this is just kind of what I talked about previously. So just a little bit of the cultural conditions are just basic stuff. So, I think watering when it's windy sounds kind of funny just because, I don't know who does that often, but I like to focus more on the concept of evaporation. So yeah, water during cooler temperatures. Mowing the lawn. This is a cool one as far as some things I guess we don't think of. So mowing, I think the golden height is going to be 2 to 3 inches. And so what that's going to do actually is that's going to provide enough space to help the grass outcompete weeds. It still shades the soil and it conserves moisture. So grass cycling, that is a buzzword here at the Garden Hotline, something we love. It's a pretty simple concept that seems almost related to compost and maybe similar to the philosophy of the tool library. So instead of externalizing our resources, we're keeping just those good nutrients that come from the grass clippings directly into the system of the lawn. So grass cycling is pretty basic. Instead of externalizing the grass that you cut, you just keep it on the lawn and it acts as a fertilizer, a natural fertilizer. So just some basic types of mowers, just to do a little promotional push for the South King Tool Library is that electric mower, and I'm going to leave that one there. So fertilizing lawn, this is something that I talked about earlier. Organic, slow release fertilizers, can't get enough of that. There's a product on the right here, just a Dr. Earth, but yeah. An interesting one is I think that there's no phosphorus allowed in lawn fertilizers unless you were to test your soil that showed that you had some sort of phosphorus depletion. And the reason why is I think it has something to do with just, again, is a good example of how those unnecessary chemicals or just, I guess, natural components end up in excess in our waterways. And I think that has something to do with just how it affects anadromous fish or salmon. So lime is a big one. Lime is actually just calcium, and dolomite lime is just calcium and magnesium. This is a soil amendment, and this is where you'd want to just, if you did need to add lime to your grass, just making sure that it's something that needed to take place. So again, just getting your soil tested. You want to apply lime after aerating it. So a good time to do this would be in the fall. And again, there's just, if your soil was lacking calcium and needed an amendment of lime, then it would just help with overall grass health. It also lime helps to increase soil structure and is a boon for earthworm populations, apparently. All right, so we have a little bit of renovation stuff. Let's see how quickly we can kind of spirit through this. Yeah, so new lawns, I guess these are just some pros and cons about whether you decide that you want to grow from sod versus seed. Sod is going to be much more expensive. You have kind of this eerie finished result right away. I don't know if anybody's seen a new leaf sod lawn. It's just kind of bizarre because they're basically like sheets of carpet that are grass. So it's a little bit more expensive. You get kind of more instant gratification. Seed is going to take a little bit more work. Competition with weeds are higher, especially while the grass is trying to grow. I would say the big benefit of trying to seed is that it's much less expensive. And you're going to have to give these guys new seedlings a bit more water in order to, I guess, establish themselves. What are we looking like on time, Amanda?
It's 6:35 now. So we did have a question come up about the types of grass that we have growing in this region. I don't know if that was something that you had planned to cover. But I know it's probably a good topic to discuss.
Yeah, that is a really good. I know. So we have grasses. I think fescues is like one thing there's probably like, I would say maybe a handful or a dozen of grass that grows maybe in different parts of the United States, but does particularly well in more shaded regions, like I guess the Puget Sound or Western Washington. I can't think of all of them off the top of my head. It is a question that we get a lot. And if you were to give me your email address in the chat box, then I would, happily send you just some of our education material that we get from extension programs that talks about the grasses that thrive here just because of they're better adapted to our growing conditions.
Do you find that some of the plant identifying apps, can they really even tell the difference between grasses? I know I've seen it called, something I knew was not bluegrass.
Yeah, bluegrass is one of them. It's a good question. I've always used those app identifying things to just identify plants. Someone should try it out. I don't know how it would do because it's such a mono kind of culture that's just like one thing, but it'd be interesting if it does. Those apps are built on kind of crowdsourcing data almost. So the more people use them, the more powerful the identification tool is. So I'm gonna go through the just this how to install a seed lawn. If someone has a question about this specifically, it's definitely something we can talk about. As far as time management goes. Oh, here we go. And just as, Amanda had said, a lot of questions can be answered by the next slide. So yeah, these are just some grass varieties. So perennial ryegrass, fescue, and then Kentucky bluegrass. So it shows some of the growing conditions that you can see. Go and take a look. Looks like the perennial ryegrass only requires about 6 hours of sun. It's winter hardy, nice deep green, dense turf, and it's disease resistant. So all of these are going to be.
I see the fescue, it needs less nitrogen, which some soils are more prone to have, more or less nitrogen. So
yeah,
that could affect. I know there was another question that came up. John asked about the why weed killers and fertilizers end up causing other types of weeds to come up, and I think that probably ties into some of those chemical balances.
Yeah. Yeah, there's probably some science there for sure. So a lot of, depending on what the weed killer is, it's going to be designed to kill a particular type of weed. And so any sort of succession environment in nature, if you were to cut down the forests or big trees, there would be a temporary boom and stuff that's going to grow very quickly and lots of sunlight, and then that would give way to other things. So I'm sure it has something to do, like Amanda said, with just the design of the weed killer, and then just opportunistic weeds in nature taking advantage of a good opportunity to grab and photosynthesize sunlight. So
some weeds are more tolerant of those chemicals that you're because it affects the balances of nitrogen and your salts and things like that they take advantage of, right? Like you can see what's the one? Scotch broom everywhere. It gets big and it can be a crack in the sidewalk and it doesn't care. It keeps going, and it's hard to really combat that. But then you have things like you might want to keep around, some of the low growing clovers, and they just won't really thrive in other areas. But it has more to do with maybe the chemical balance that you're adding to the soil and amending there.
Yeah. And that's why it's always good. Just getting a soil test is kind of exciting, just so you can see what your soil composition is and maybe ways that you can help amend and build the soil. I think, yeah, clover is another big one. Clover actually existed and lawns in the United States and just mixes for a long time. And then is recently, I don't know if it's in the last 50 years, has been just, I guess, taken out of different grasses just for maybe aesthetic reasons. But clover, I can't speak too highly about clover. Just it's fixes nitrogen, and you can always consider, if you want a more natural approach, just a lawn your, hey, here we go. See, I love how this is just falling into place for me and Amanda. So yeah, clover used to be in lawns. It adds a little bit of versatility. Again, it's gonna add nutrients naturally through a fixation process. So as opposed to adding nitrogen to your soil, clover is just gonna help the grass. I think a lot of times we have this concept of weeds that are kind of dug into all of our psyches. As long as if it's not pure grass, then it's not great. But I mean, some weeds are better than others, I guess. And clover is definitely one of those plants that I can't speak highly enough. So good pollinator, it flowers, and it in the past has been in lawn blends, but I think there is a resurgence of clover lawns, which is really cool. All right, so the next section is going to be lawn disease. And again, just sorry for time management. This is a pretty robust presentation. We can we'll either breeze through it and then think of some questions. So as far as time, Amanda, what are we looking at?
It's about 6:45 and we had a couple more questions come in, but
Sure, yeah.
I know we want to talk about diseases too. Hansi, really, and kind of going back, would love to know how to figure out what kind of grass is growing in the yard, and then about soil testing. I'm sure you probably have some slides on that, like where there's resources that people can get their soil tested.
Yeah, definitely. I think there may be links at the end of the presentation that I'll leave that on. For the soil testing, the one that we suggest, if you can just stick this in your brain or write it down, is the King Conservation District does soil testing for a nominal fee of, I think, $20. And they'll send you a pretty detailed diagnostic of what's happening in your soil. We can always help you decipher it because it is kind of hard. So feel free to send the analysis to us. It's kind of like getting results back from the doctor and needing some sort of interpretation about like your blood work or something. And so trying to figure out what kind of grass you have is probably going to take a little bit of work. And I mean, I think that may be based on just sending some resources potentially, because
they send some pictures to Garden Hotline.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I can't push that enough. So I think one of the big things about being an educator is, people, to some degree, we are experts, but the gardening world is large, and, there's lots going on and everybody has their expertise. So if you had any follow-up questions, to send to us via the email or talk to us on the phone, that gives us some time just to do a little bit of research, as opposed to just kind of teaching stuff on the fly. So even if we, don't know something, we're very capable of finding reputable sources just to kind of back up what we're talking about. So how are the questions going? Did I answer them for the time being?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, cool. It seems like there's actually not, so on the subject of disease, there's not a lot of I guess pathogens type diseases. Lawns do pretty well. They seem like they fare worse with like animals. So this is one of the weird ones. It's called red thread. I don't know if it's a fungus. I guess we could tell in the Latin name above. So it's seen in the fall time here in the Pacific Northwest. Moisture and humidity seems to encourage it. So just kind of par for the course for a lot of other soil-borne pathogens like powdery mildew and stuff like that. It's not going to kill your lawn, but it's going to stress it out, which can lead to just, other things that happen to it. It's going to degrade the health of the lawn. Managing something like this is just going to be an application of nitrogen. So again, can't push the soil test enough there just to know what kind of nitrogen or what kind of components you have in your lawn. You want to keep it well hydrated during the summer, which is tricky because as we all know, like with last summer, we had that kind of devastating drought, is like just that challenging question of like what you want to do with your lawn, whether you want to let it go that golden brown and stop watering it, or if you want to water it. And so my only advice there is just smart watering. So just, water when the sun isn't blazing, and just think about how much you're watering, like water efficiently. All right, so this is one of our favorites, the mole. So there's a lot of, if you were to go on the internet, you may get lost in a rabbit hole, or maybe a mole hole, of like all these kind of home remedies on how you can like get rid of moles. I think the reality is that moles are they're here to stay. They're kind of cute. Like I've caught one that was stuck in a parking lot, and they're just little animals. But they will wreak havoc on your beautiful lawns. So they make these big mole holes. And I've heard all sorts of different ways to manage moles, that involve, one of my coworkers had explained that her dad actually used to used kitty litter in the holes. And so what that does is it has the kind of urine smell that scares them. Another big thing with moles is once you figure out how to best manage them, which I think honestly is a lot of just being tolerant. The holes that they make, you can just get a garden rake and just rake back into the grass, and so it works really well as a top dressing. So maybe it's an attitude shift a little bit. I know that's not the best news, but just rake in those holes.
Let them aerate your soil for you.
Yeah, exactly. And they're attracted to, so moles are going to live in lawns that are doing really well and healthy because they have a bunch of those beneficial insects, or just insects in general are going to be attracted to healthy, well hydrated, watered lawns. So you can pat yourself on the back if you have moles, as long as you don't, your blood pressure doesn't raise from trying to get rid of them. These are just some common pests that live in grass. Crane fly is one of them. My cats love chasing crane flies. Just a classic. I think when I was a kid, I called them mosquito eaters. I'm going to skip over this one though, because just for time management, to get to one that's kind of a novel pest that we're kind of curious at the Garden Hotline. So something that has hitchhiked, I believe, maybe in the just by SeaTac or by the airport. So South Seattle metropolitan area is this European chafer beetle. So I believe that this is endemic or just exists now in Eastern United States and is something that is relatively new here, maybe the last like 6 or 7 years. And so the European chafer, which is a scarab beetle that is similar to the Japanese beetle and June bug, is just this menace to the lawn, really for 2 reasons. So the larval stage for the European chafer, which you can see in the top right here, is going to chew on grass roots when it's growing. So between the months of September and I think maybe late spring, while it's pupating and going through its, I think what's considered like an instar stages, just to turn into this adult beetle, which is down here, it's going to chew on basically the roots of grass. And so this other thing that happens, which is kind of exciting, I guess, depending on how you look at it, it's not exciting for lawn owners, but is it attracts animals. So 2 very intelligent animals. So you have your corvids, which are these guys here, this, small murder of crows, just super intelligent birds that have discovered this bountiful protein resource in the grass. And then raccoons too. So just an example of 2 animals. So if you look at your lawn and you start seeing these big thatches pulled up, and you're like, wow, like, where is that coming from? There's a good chance that you have a European chafer, either infestation or just kind of just the larvae in the soil. And so you can actually dig a couple inches into the soil and they're usually all over the place. So this is a pest that's kind of spreading quickly and colonizing just, I guess, in any direction in the Seattle metropolitan area. And they're still trying to come up with a management plan, but just basic lawn health is going to take care of this. So just, aerating, overseeding, top dressing, really just making sure that, your lawn is healthy and just that what you're working on is healthy. So healthy soil. So in theory, a lot of the stuff that we covered in regards to lawn health and this, lightning fast presentation should help reduce the European chafer without having to use any pesticides or herbicides.
It kind of looks like a June bug. I grew up on the East Coast, so I always think of the green, scarab looking beetle, and it kind of looks like that. Is that right?
It is. It's very similar. So the adults don't they don't bite or they don't inflict any damage to the grass. But I think what kind of gives you the heebie-jeebies is like in June, they're basically short of a biblical plague of locusts, like not quite, but they come out in prolific numbers out of the grass and like fly into the trees and mate and then go back into the grass at night, and then come back out for like a week or a couple of weeks or something. It's kind of gross. But that is a thing that is like I would say public enemy number one on lawns. So
I was gonna say I had a mole jump into my raised beds because they just had such great, biomes there. But they are really good at eating all kinds of pests, and as much of a pain as they are, they do they do a good job of eating stuff.
Yeah, so that's a good, just to kind of underscore that philosophy of I guess being
Path of
tolerant.
least resistance. That's what I.
Yeah, because you're just gonna stress yourself out trying to get rid of moles. I mean, just you could get rid of the mole holes, like, and everybody has the ways that they do it, but it's just kind of maybe changing your attitude about like animals that are naturally part of the system of, taking care of things without you having to like break your back or set anything on fire or any other of the crazy stuff that people do to try to get rid of moles. So I don't know if Amanda, can you see what slide I'm on, or do you know? You don't need to if you're not sure. I'm just trying to think about how much time.
It's long. I mean, I'm not sure how far along you are, but I know, these are probably good. Weeds are always pervasive when you mow weeds, kind of, I think telling people what happens is nice to hear.
Yeah. So weeds, can't get enough of weeds, just because again, in that kind of mindset change, like I would say when it comes to lawns, a big thing that you want to think about are the existence or the weeds being there, other than clover and some other ones, which I would consider beneficial, are there probably because of just the needs of the soil health and the lawn health are not being met. So weeds are really great at growing in really just poor, crappy soil conditions where, the soil is either like super acidic or it's, even in some poisonous soils, like weeds tend to do good. So what that is just to, add to your kind of your garden growing insight, is that weeds are almost like not necessarily like a canary in a coal mine, but just an indicator of soil health. So some weeds are going to grow better in other areas. Like I think of buttercup, it grows in super wet areas. Another one is horsetail. Dandelions are kind of like the classic, enemy of like lawns, but dandelions are, actually edible, beneficial weeds, and they're good pollinators. But if you do want to get rid of them, you can get rid of them manually using a tool, which I'm not sure if that's part of what is included at the South King Tool Library, but
we have some really great extendable dandelion forks, and we have step weeders that I'm really excited about because they'll actually grab it and be able to pull the whole weed out.
Yeah, that's great. And the other one that's kind of new to me, honestly, in the last couple of weeks, is just this concept of how high you mow your lawn. So if you cut it too short, it's gonna expose the soil, and then there's that kind of Goldilocks area, which is around 2 inches, which is gonna shade out the weed seedlings. So it's also about how you decide to maintain your lawn. So we just have some common weeds here that I talked about previously. So dandelion, plantain, cat's ear looks like dandelion, except it has a fuzzy, I guess that's where it gets its name from. And then moss, which is kind of a weird, I guess it's like more of a weed in the concept of it, less of like an actual definition. Moss, again, just an indicator of maybe a low light where moss is going to thrive. So
I love moss. I'm such a weirdo. I always preach against it when people come to tear it out, and I'm like, I like it.
I think moss is great. And I mean, our lawns, like we don't, we live in such a, depending on where you live, I mean, I would say there's a good chance that parts of your lawn are going to be shaded. So I mean, I don't know, moss isn't always
the
like
path of least resistance. That's
exactly. You want to pick and choose your battles, and I don't think moss is like one that, at least from my opinion on the garden hotline, like a couple of my colleagues may feel differently, but I would choose to focus on something else.
And so dandelions, sheep sorrel. Sheep sorrel, it can be deadly to wildlife, but it is edible. But dandelions are edible, and plantain is also edible. And And we have short leaf plantain too. You see the broadleaf plantain there. We have the thin ones that are really pervasive.
Yeah, and there's a couple other that aren't on here that, well, I guess they're not technically lawn weeds, but this is a good just kind of.
And some are native, but some are not. There's certain, I know Doc has just one native species that is here. We had an educational class with a native herbalist
Well, that's exciting.
a while ago. Yeah, and that was fabulous to learn more about the native roots of some of those, literally, some of the plants. But Doc is one that has a really long root system. And yeah, that one, oof, you can go about 2 feet down and still not get the whole root there. So
Yeah. Let's see what we got here. Oh, we got some more here. So this is exciting. So daisy, yarrow, a type of yarrow, ground ivy, tall fescue, which looks like it's just a misplaced grass, as opposed to other fescue. So it's just gonna, like, be aesthetically unpleasing. I'm not sure about the annual bluegrass, since that's like a different type that is planted intentionally. So maybe it's just unintentional plantings that doesn't go well with whatever was intentionally planted. And then, yeah, here's a little bit about moss. We had gone over a lot of this. So, moss is just going to be managing growing conditions, fertility of the soil, acidity of the soil. I would say the big thing to look out for is going to be light, though, what we had talked about. But again, in theory, if you're taking care of your lawn and going over, it has the right acidity, you aerate it and top dress it with compost and shade, I guess, what I talked about, and just excess moisture. So making sure that you're not watering it too much. This is going to be important, during our long winter season, which obviously you're not watering your lawn there, but it's not surprising that during the winter here is when, moss really starts to come out on our cars. I know it's on our cars, but just the big picture stuff, right? About just growing on everything. So, and so just a fun little nature fact here, because why not? This is something that Laura put in here, just to make you maybe think a little bit, just in that spirit of changing your attitude about some of the stuff that naturally grows around here. Is we have a lovely hummingbird nest, which I think this is probably the actual size of the hummingbird nest. So it's probably true to size. Is going to be made up of moss, and it's going to be, made up of different lichens and then spider silk, which is pretty cool. So if that helps you change your attitude to think that, we do live in a world with other animals, a lot of birds, mammals that are probably, utilizing this stuff that maybe if it isn't desirable to us, it's desirable to them. So
there's over 2,000 different species of moss. Random things that I know.
very cool. I'm like, please don't ask me what the 2,000 names are. No. All right, so managing lawn weeds. I guess this gets into the tool component. This is a hori hori in the top right corner, and then there's this nifty dandelion tool. Just that we can give that shout out again for accessing this stuff at the South King Tool Library. Seems like there's a lot of cool stuff that you can check out. So I'm going to rush through this one because it's not, I would say it's not terribly important. It's pretty self-explanatory. So we have some lawns in the wrong place. So what's wrong in this picture? So the one on the top is on a hill. So slopes, no more than 12% grade, shading, which is something that we've talked about a bunch. Laura, the director, had actually told me that one time she saw a guy pulling a lawnmower up and down a slope on a string. So yeah, don't risk life and limb to have your sloped lawn, make it reasonable. Lawn remover, Amanda talked a little bit about this. There are mechanical methods that include sod cutters, whether it's like a hand or like a manual one or a mechanical. Hire it out, I think, is just like a, save your back and save the labor if you have a budget for that.
Especially if you don't know when your yard was put in. I've had people ask if we have sod cutters, which we don't, but we do have that tool that's in the center that's an edger basically. But you don't know how deep your roots are until you
Yeah.
get into it. And then even then it's a big variable. So it's really hard to do that. I know Jeanette has had success using a sod cutter, and I don't decry it, but it's just very hard to know the depth that you're working with. I had
Yeah.
a question, and I wasn't sure if it is something that's covered, but I
Yeah.
know some of us in this region have septic tanks. And
Yeah.
so the drain fields for septic tanks, how do you, testing, of course, we've learned that, but managing that as a factor in yards might be something that I could learn about.
Yeah, I off the top of oops, sorry, we actually had a garden hotline email asking about septic tanks. And I also remember growing up at my parents' house, they had a septic tank, and it almost seemed that around the septic tank you could see where it was at in the grass, you know. There are some methods to managing that, and there's like some literature that I could definitely send. Unfortunately, I don't know off the top of my head, but it is something to consider if you're ever experiencing any problems, or to just think that there's like some sort of thing underneath that is changing the soil composition and the depth and stuff like that. I mean, people have a lot of things in their lawn, whether you use like oil to heat your house, like the oil tank is going to be in the lawn, and it doesn't necessarily change the way that it looks. But if you are having problems where that septic tank is at, then again, just doing a little detective work to consider what that means exactly, and like what you may need to do to change that if you're having problems with that. So lawn removal. So just I think we talked about this in the previous presentation that I did with Amanda. Sheet mulching is a cool concept. We do it constantly. So this is a natural way to get rid of your lawn that's going to save your back and save your labor and not get dehydrated as much. So sheet mulching, just a quick crash course in our short time is you're basically starving the grass of light. So you're going to put down a layer of decomposing cardboard or newspaper, and then you're going to put mulch on top of it. And so, it's pretty basic, like the plant can't photosynthesize, and so it's going to die. And then as opposed to removing those layers of grass or the, turf, it's just being kept inside the system naturally and decomposing and adding nutrients through natural grass cycling.
We do have a good stack of burlap right now. So you put the newspaper down and then burlap on top of that. It's a nice way to keep it weighed down.
Yeah.
The mulch on top of that too.
Yeah. And I should just kind of why, this does beg the question, like there should be a question mark, like lawn removal, and like, why would you want to do that? And that's a good question. So I grew up loving lawns. I love the feel of them on like feet, and just, they're definitely something soothing about a healthy lawn. Lawns do require a lot of maintenance, and there is a lot of water that goes into them, which, equates to money that you spend. So I think the hope is that through the stuff that we're teaching, there's just these kind of natural lawn care methods, which is just basic lawn health and the reduction of pesticides and herbicides, is you don't have to get rid of your lawn necessarily, but if you wanted to maybe adapt to something new, you could always reduce your lawn. So you can
next slide.
Yeah, exactly. So
there you go.
Yeah. So you have eco-turf, native grasses, steppable ground covers, which is a pretty cool concept. So any ground cover that's designed to withstand being stepped on. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but there is a multitude of them. Perennial clover, which is really cool. There's this, Laura put this in there. There's a Crosscut article that came out that I will have to find and then put in the chat box that just talks about how clover is helping cities, I guess, with climate change, and how there is a unique genetic code for that changes based on whether it's in Hiroshima or in Seattle and even in Tacoma. So great article, great push for clover, but you do have options for reducing your lawn while still having a section of your lawn that you can enjoy. So I always particularly like the aesthetic look of a house that has a mixture of like ornamentals and trees, and then has like little sections of lawn that are maintained, and they're easy to maintain because it's less surface area and less water and maintenance and stuff. So, and here we go. Tools, we talked about some of these already. So this is my favorite. I don't know why. It's just kind of a cool concept. I can't even remember the name of it. Do you remember, Amanda?
I call it a plug aerator. I don't remember what it was.
Plug aerator.
Yeah.
When you're aerating your soil, you can actually just do this throughout the whole of the grass. And if it's really compacted, you can do it more than once. I think this one in the top right is this nifty dandelion root weed and just basic rake and your hori. So
yeah, I don't know if we have a hori because it just probably looks too much like a knife, but we do have some weed forks and a lot of other like the dandelion pullers, and we even have a crack de-weeder to really help reduce the chemical use, in those pesky crack weeds that just seem to never want to go away. But we have lots of fun things. You definitely should come by and check out what we have. That includes you too, Gavin. We have to have you come over and take a look at what we have.
Yeah, I would love to come over. I think it sounds like a really cool place. So
yeah.
All right. So somehow I managed to get through 36 slides in a period of an hour, probably.
Yeah.
Which is great. So I don't know how long people want to stick around, but we definitely have some room for questions. And then these are, how do you use these? I mean, I think
if you right click, you could copy the hyperlink.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen if that's okay.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna put some links into the chat box. So.
And I'll go ahead and just stop recording, but thank you so much, Gavin, for the great class. And that way anybody can maybe unmute and ask their questions. So thanks, Gavin.
Yeah, of course.